Hey, we're on. We've done it again.
We did
Greg,
it.
good to see you. We don't have Josh or Corey helping us out, which is, intense. The fact that I can figure this out on my own, or maybe I'm just,
The new beardless, technologically savvy Aaron.
yeah. Welcome to Earful of Dirt. We're live on Facebook right now, so if you come around and start hitting us with questions. This sweet software allows us to watch the comments. So like everyone can watch the comments, whereas on YouTube, no one could watch the comments at all. Unless
Always
you
improving
were.
here at Earful.
So that's really cool. So what do we got? This is a quick hit. We did a quick hit a couple of weeks ago while we were on break to talk about one of the games. But what do we got? What do we got now? It's the final warm-up match, United States versus Canada. It's actually, I think, is it our third? Yeah, it's like our third Can-Am Cup game in a calendar year, or roughly a calendar year. So, which I think as a commercial thing, we always want to beat Canada. I think the more times we can consistently play Canada, the better. And historically, we haven't always played Canada every year, which is really, I would say, is a significant problem overall to grow the sport commercially because, USA versus Canada in hockey is huge. So why not try to, build up that same thing here in rugby? I guess this game took place of the Australia game that we were supposed to have.
Unfortunately, yeah.
I think from what I understand,
I don't know what's better because Canada is risky because historical trends aside, of late we've certainly had the better of Canada. If some fluke, whatever loss comes this weekend as the last warm-up before the World Cup, that would be devastating. Whereas Australia, you kind of expect to lose. So
yeah, I think Australia would have been an interesting warm-up match. It really wouldn't have been a warm-up match. It would have been a kind of a beating for us, and they would have gotten their warm-up. Canada, on the other hand, it's like they're good enough to be very competitive against us. In the last 2 years, like we've beaten them. We've beaten Canada. I guess 11 out of 12 tries in the last. This would be the 11th win out of 12 meetings in our last 12 meetings. The game we did not win was a draw.
But one of the wins we won earlier this year was very close to.
Yeah, it was very close, but that was a better roster that I feel like looking back at that roster for Canada was a much better roster for them than it was. Not for them. So that was a much better roster for us in theory when you think about it. TD Lomositelli was there. You had Paul Asike, like pretty much. Everyone that could be available was available for that game. And, it was really close. And then they had a much better roster for us in the game as part of the PNC. And, we made them look atrocious. So that's so in essence, I guess we call this a trap game, right?
We call it a trap game.
Canada hasn't published their roster yet, but they did publish their World Cup roster, so you do have an idea of, to an extent, what Kingsley Jones is going to go for. One of the things for the United States has been, I guess, a hinge problem, and what people want to know what coaching the hinge is. The hinge is your halfbacks, like when you don't have our halfbacks together all the time, and then now like we have, like, if you look at it, Davies and AJ play together all the time. Like there have been the only time they haven't played together under Gary Gold seems to be when either of them are injured. So that seems for now that seems to be our knocked on starting pairing.
Except for the PNC. I mean, the PNC, Davies wasn't really, certainly not every week was a starter.
Well, no, that one was interesting. I think looking at where gold is going, I was surprised not to see Augsburger. I wasn't surprised to see how much he relied upon De Haas, because I went and looked back. De Haas has 13 caps under Gary Gold. So,
yeah.
and he's 20. So like you see where Gary Gold's going. He's definitely building for the future, but the other primary, I think there was a Twitter thread I was in the other day, and it was a question of like ranking scrum halves in the United States. And, Petrie's name was brought up, and I looked at, although Petrie was named as sort of the fourth scrum half as a non-traveling reserve for the PNC and the wider training group, he never assembled. There were 10 guys that did not assemble for the PNC at all that were on the list in case, injuries did happen, but none of them were called in as far as, no, Reichert Hadding was, but he had a knee infection. So he was sent home, which it sucks to like have a good season and then, not be medically fit so that you can try to earn your shot and a cap.
We need 8 depth too. If something happens to Cam Dolan, there's a lot to make up there, especially if Nick Savetta is hurt or not fully effective, and we rely on Cam also as a jumper. We have no one to come in for him.
Yeah, that is a significant problem, because I think the other options at number 8 are different players, right? Based on who we've seen in this roster, you've got Tony Lamborn can play number 8. You've got Henko Hammerscheis can play number 8. Jamison Faana Schultz can play number 8. I think the only one that is kind of similar, if you put in, and we're seeing him on the USA roster this week, is Malon. They're roughly about the same size and athletically comparable, but Malon I think only has 3 caps, so he really hasn't been used that much. And for some reason, he was in the doghouse in Glendale and did not play a lot, or he was injured and they just didn't talk about it. I'd prefer him to have been injured and not been in the doghouse, because he provides an athletic component that, some of, as far as our international backers are concerned, he's there, Yeah. But those are the guys who can play 8, but they're really like 6s, or in Tony's case, he's a 7. But looking at where we're going, who did you feel like for Kingsley Jones? Who did you feel was hard done on based on who went to the PNC, not who didn't go to the PNC? Because there were players that didn't go to the PNC. So they weren't, I would say they were hard done by not being selected originally. But players that did play in the PNC that didn't get selected by Kingsley Jones for the World Cup, who do you think was hard done by?
I'm looking at the list right here. It's possible I'm going to forget exactly who was in the PNC, but I think Souter comes to mind. Let's see. Olmsted is in there. Justice Sears Drew, I like that. I mean, no one is really sticking out to me as a snub from the Canadian World Cup roster.
The one for me that did is maybe this is 1, 2 doesn't have the other, was Rob Brower. Compared to Hubert Bidens. Rob Brower basically started every single game. I think he started 15 games for the Arrows and played a heck of a lot, and was rewarded for his form, being named, all Major League first team All Major League Rugby. So that's really Theo Souter not being named.
Yeah, I love Brower as an MLR player, and I didn't prepare any of this. I could be remembering wrong, but if memory serves, when NOLA played Toronto, though, I feel like Hubert Bidens was out there scrumming, and they were just, surprisingly getting the better of Toronto. And I remember I remember feeling during that match that Hubert Bidens was really showing his veteran scrum presence in a way I didn't expect in advance. So now I'm not really surprised that he's.
I look at Hubert because he's been he's been such a mainstay as a prop for Canada, much in the way that I look at Fry now, because I've been very critical of Fry's form in the past, especially for the Eagles, because there were times we would get penalized where you're thinking about this longtime pro, and that shouldn't be getting penalized like this because he just he's in an environment that is completely professional. But when I think about Biden's and say Fry, is they're longtime pros, or I guess more so Fry than Biden's, but they're your long-standing loose heads that have been in the squad for a very long time, and they do things that, as a friend of the show, Lawrence Weisall says about Eric Fry, and Hubert Biden's also, I would think, is he does the little things that you really can't, like, unless you're the coach, you really can't talk about, because most of us, to an extent, I understand what he means about like what Fry does. Like I really do. But it took me a long time to realize what that meant. And I think that's what Biden's does. And I'm not saying Rob Brower doesn't do that at all. That may be why Kingsley selected Biden's and then went young the rest of the way, because, Biden's or Brower, their difference in age is 1 year. Brower is 36, Biden's is 37. So neither of them are going to be long-term fixes at loose head the next cycle. Brower will be 40, Biden's will be 41, and neither of them will probably be playing in MLR. If they are, holy heck, good for them. So, I mean, both are towards the end of their careers.
You've seen more. I mean, in a World Cup, when you're playing not MLR teams, but the best front rows in the world, you want a guy who's seen some stuff. You need someone who's ready for any, or at least a wider range of tricks that might come out there in the trenches. And I think Biden's gives him that more so than Brower.
Yeah, and I guess I look in the backs. The questions I had, I really didn't have any questions in the forwards for Canada, but in the backs, I think people, especially MLR players, do have reasonable questions as to why they're not playing, because, well, they're pros, and the people that are in the squad are part of they're not pros. They're just playing club rugby, and
they haven't been providing successful results for 2 or 3 years now. So
you can't tell me. You look at Nick Blevins, who's older, like significantly, and saying, "Is this guy going to be a center of the future?" And I'm not saying you should take guys because you're building towards the future, but looking at the program, you don't always want to be old, like really old. Interestingly, the U.S. roster has gotten even younger than when Tolkien was coach. Like, I think we were kind of old when Tolkien was coach, because there wasn't a professional outlet domestically, and it's harder to keep at the national team level all these young players, because all these young players
take more time to get noticed. I mean, you weren't on TV every week, so you had to be good for more years to attract attention to you. In the pre-MLR days. So
I think guys like, to an extent, I think guys like, Brock Stoller do have questions, because he can play multiple positions. He can play fullback. He can play center. Theo Souter. Theo Souter, he's got a hard done. He wasn't on any roster, which is like this. The guy was the scoring champion in MLR. I know he wasn't, the back of the year. I get it, but he was a scoring champion in MLR. You can't say that you can't use his skills. I think Jeff Hassler kind of takes the 14 position, because Vandermeer goes over to 11, and you sort of have that. But then you have another high skill player. Theo Souter, kind of hard done by the way the season went, got injured. And when he was healthy, you had Levas and Mires just tearing it up, but he was still fit for camp and didn't get the opportunity to show his skills. But these guys that are amateur players are going to the World Cup. So what does that say for the selections, I think? But for the most part, you are seeing an impact. There are 15 players that have MLR experience from the 2019 season on this roster. And so, but looking at, so that, I guess my biggest question for them, for Canada, really is not really 9 per se. I think Phil Mack is going to be your locked-on starter at 9 for Canada's major games, but they're 10. Is it going to be O'Leary? If it's going to be O'Leary, just stop messing around and have it be O'Leary and put Nelson at 15, because it gives you a high-level fullback, and you're not really questioning about, I guess, Theo Sauter because you've got Peter Nelson. But if you're going to go like even more weird and put McRory at 10, who's a 9, then we do have some questions about selections.
I think we'll see. It'll be interesting to see who they put at 10 and 9, I guess, to a certain extent for Saturday. That'll probably give us some more insight on what they plan to do for the World Cup.
So what do you think? What do you think their king? I guess Canada more so, because we'll get into it on the U.S. side, is wanting to get out of this.
I think if you're Canadian rugby going into this World Cup, you're in a tough situation because you have two competing interests that are, in a sense, mutually exclusive. On the one hand, you need your program to start regaining popularity, which means you need to win, do well at a World Cup. On the other hand, as you were observing, you need to develop the future too, and so you need youth in there. So I think what they're going to try to do, and this is, I don't mean to have a cop-out answer, but I think they're going to try to strike that balance of doing well enough that they can come home happy, and the Canadian rugby community will be at least partially reinvigorated, while getting as much experience to the next generation as possible.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much where Canada is. I don't really understand why they're not going younger. Say bringing Persilier onto this roster. I know he's like 19, 20, but U.S. has a 20-year-old scrum half. Like, come on. I mean, Persilier is playing at a high level in the Espoir League. I think it's with Claremont. So why he's not on this roster, I don't know. I would have used the PNC to get him a lot of time and spin him up. Like that's what I would have done. But I'm not in charge of Canada. So I guess now looking at this match, and from the U.S. side, what do you think about this roster?
I like it for the most part. Very happy with it. I think the PNC made things a little more confusing than they had been in a while. I think this is Gary Gold showing his hand a little more clearly again. There are a couple things I regret. I regret that AJ is not. If this is really the first choice team, more or less, that we won't have had one run up with AJ, between the ARC and the World Cup. With the first choice starters. So that I think that's a bummer, but McGee, it looks like McGee is going to be the answer to the backup 10 question, based on, primarily on just this roster today. So that's good. It'll be good to at least have that, with the starters. I love the front row. I'm worried about lineouts. I think, obviously, we're hoping Civetta comes back. But we need to clearly be prepared for a world without Civetta, and this is the best we have for lineouts without Civetta. So if we can't look good in lineouts this weekend against Canada, we're really going to be reliant on Civetta for any sort of lineout success in the World Cup. So I'm going to be closely focused on that in particular. And I think the 9 battle is, as everyone talks about all the time, is completely up in the air. I have no idea who Gary Gold is going to start at 9. So this seems like, Nate Augsburg's, most obvious chance to win that job if he can do well this weekend. So I'll be watching that.
Yeah, I look at this roster, and based on just fitness, this has to be, for the most part, I think this has to be, minus the halfback pairing, is when it comes to the 15, it has to be your first choice, right? I look at this. Eric Fry is finally healthy. And I will say, like, one of the things I saw is, like, the dude has abs now. Like, they have been, like, they're
the props, Fry.
They're like 7 weeks. Like, they're like 7-week camp. Like, put them in fitness. Like, they are, like, this team is going to be very physical. Like, they're going to be able to run around the park against a team like Canada. I'm very sure.
Switched out a guy like Bryce Campbell for Marcel Brocky in the centers, which is like a step down in physicality, if you ask me.
Well, I think somewhat that is like a skill thing, and I want to say just because of how much of I'm not saying Bryce Campbell's not a leader, and I'm not saying Bryce Campbell's less skilled. I think we've seen a lot more of Bryce's skills since he came back. Like, he's with London Irish now, but we've seen a lot more of the skills that he has rather than, I would say, during the Mitchell era when he was playing right out of college. You saw the bowling ball Bryce Campbell. I think now, not necessarily at the international level because of coaching, but I think just because of the higher level that he has played with MLR and now London Irish, you're seeing his other skills. He can kick the ball from hand. He is a decent distributor, and he can also rumble. But we're also seeing that from Lasike too, because everyone thought Lasike was just, a bowling ball when he is in fact a bowling ball, but he can also kick from hand and distribute because he's been playing rugby since he was like 2. So
Paul Lasike kicks from hand. I'm a happy guy.
So
those kicks are lasers in the PNC.
So for me, it's like I talked about with Fry. You've got a guy that does the little things. Seeing Tofete ready to go and Lamositele, I want to see what they do because this is a fully European professional front row. And if you look at this, I mean, you've got the type 5. I don't think Ben Landry is returning to Ealing. He might be, but because it says that's his club, but I know he was on a 1-year deal. So he might be returning. They just haven't said anything. I'm not sure. But you have an entire type 5 that spent the entire season last year playing in Europe. Eric Fry of the 5, the least, because he was injured and, recovery from that. But still, guys that are all European professionals, which for the moment is the top level of play right now. But when you go down this roster, again, there is not a single amateur player on this roster for the United States. And this is like pretty freaking awesome. And then the back row is where the interesting questions get. I'm more of a John Quill at 6 and a Henko Hammerscheis at 7 type guy, but they're both on the field. I would have gone if Tony Lamborn was available. Honestly, I might have gone with Tony Lamb, and that gives you 2 short flankers. Historically, with the way selections are going, your 7 is sort of the smaller one, and the 6 is more of your like dirty work guy that's also physically bigger. But maybe I wanted to see a little more of Maylon because what we've seen in flashes during the PNC was very good. And John Quill has 35 caps. I know what John Quill is going to give me. I kind of want to see what Maylon can give me. I know at this point with 16 caps with Henko Hammerscheis, I know what he's going to give me. And then, you've got Cam Dolan. So if I look at lineout possibilities, based on where we've done, our caller has been Nick. Like it has been Nick. So, but then you go to the options, the caller for lineouts and the lineout leader for NOLA has been Cam Dolan. John Quill can take the ball in the lineout. Greg Peterson, well, he's 6'9". So, and I've seen them thrust his massive self in the air for lineouts. And then Ben Landry also takes the ball in the air also. So I think we have options. The difference is the guy making the calls. how will we do there? And I think during the PNC, especially when we went to for the Samoa game, we did okay. Japan, I think we did okay too. It's just now we've had 2 games to deal with not having Nick Civetta. Then let's see what we can do in the line out here against Canada. Because if we steal a bunch of their balls, I good to go.
Steal a bunch of their balls. I'll be happy if we just retain 80% of our own throws.
Yeah. So I guess before I touch on the halfbacks, the back 5. I think Martin Iosefo has sort of impressed with his coaching staff to an extent. Previous to the PNC, he only had 2 caps, and those were both under Mitchell, well before Gary Gold was on the radar. And he's played in both. I think he started all 3 PNC games, actually. He started the first one.
I think it may be 2 or 3, but I can't remember.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting. And then, talked to, a bunch of the GMs who'd spoken and talked to Gary Gold in Glendale, and Martin really impressed in camp. Like, that's why he started.
They must see something they like
against Canada.
I haven't seen it exactly.
There are some of those 7s bad habits with Martin, and the reason why they're bad habits is because they don't work with 15s. Like, those are you can do those things in 7s, just like there are 15s bad habits. If you're going, if you're a 15s player and you're going to transition to 7s and try to play on the 7s World Series, you're gonna have to unlearn a bunch of stuff because the games are different. Like, they just are. So Marcel being at 13, not really surprised at the selection, really, because he's played, even though he's got 18 caps, I feel like he's got 30, and he's played all across our back line at 11, at 12, at 13, at 14, and at 15. He's kind of one of those guys, it seems, that you can't take off. He can kick from hand. He is a distributor, and he's pretty big. He is a physical player. And if you look overall at this roster, the only person under 6 foot is Nate Augsburger. Or wait, no, Paul Asike is 5'11", but still, I would say the only short person on this roster is Nate Augsburger. Think that says a lot about where we're going with selections and physicality.
Stars. What's Dylan Fawcett? He's probably not 6 foot.
He's I think he's 5'11", 6 foot. He's not huge. He's a little taller than me. So, I mean, maybe it's the mustache that gives him an extra inch.
I get your point though. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely a big squad. I think obviously they see something with Iosefo rather. And look, dynamic attacking, I think, finds its way onto the pitch some way. I mean, they find a place to put you. Wing is a great place to put you. Based on what I've seen, which is not, I don't see camp, I don't know what they're doing, when they're off the TV camera. This is probably my 3rd, most optimal choice for the backs. I probably would have, for me, just based on this 23, I probably would have started Campbell at center, Brocky at wing with Iosefo on the bench. And if not that, I probably would have started Brocky at center and maybe Mikey Teo at wing.
Yeah, I take that for sure. One of the things for me is, like you said, attacking, dynamic attack. Well, Mikey Teo gives you a dynamic attack, right? I guess the question is what. So if you take Iosefo off, and you keep Brocky on, are you bringing, like you said, maybe Teo? Where are you putting?
I'm putting Bryce Campbell.
Yeah. So, yeah, I don't see that. My biggest thing is like you said, a regret. Is I wanted to see the first choice for one game, at every position, if healthy. And right now, I think the only guy who's really not healthy is Civetta, but he'll be healthy for when we get to Japan. I
hope.
I mean, he's been doing all the fitness. You can't with how dislocated that ankle was. you can't run up and down Red Rocks Amphitheater if you're not okay.
Yeah, I mean, I hear that. I do expect, based on all the press releases, that he will be declared fit and he'll be able to play. Will he be able to jump as effectively on a barely fit ankle? I think that remains to be seen, and I think we need him to be able to do that. So
yeah,
fingers are whatever they say. My fingers are gonna be crossed till I see a successful line out in Tokyo.
So we get to the halfbacks, and I think you touched on this, that McGee seems to be the knocked on backup, because the rosters we've seen especially during the PNC and even before that were AJ at 10, Hooley at fullback, and McGee on the bench. And that gives you a lot of options to work with, because Hooley is pretty, I think, my opinion is that Hooley and Will McGee are basically the same type of player at fullback. Not at fullback, but at 10. At 10. And neither are AJ McGee. Period.
I think Hooley is better defensively, personally. So I would have probably picked Hooley as the backup 10, but if they were going to do that, that would have been this week. I mean, you have a healthy Teo as an option, and Hooley is still the 15 with McGee at 10. That means to me, Gary Gold wants McGee as the backup 10.
Yeah, I think if I was going first choice, everything, and if Mikey Teo is fit, he can't kick like Will Hooley can, but he can kick from hand. I might slide someone else out, put Will McGee off the bench, Hooley as a backup. Like for me at 10, I think Hooley and McGee are basically the same. At fullback, there isn't really a choice. I think it's Hooley is a better fullback than McGee is. But even when during the autumn, when we didn't have AJ and Hooley got knocked out with a concussion, McGee, started and played well. I mean, we won that Samoa game, and we won that Romania game. And, 10 wasn't really the issue against Ireland. They were just really good, And so, but this halfback pairing, I think, although Augsburger's form has been better during this MLR season than Davies, with the way Gary Gold's going, I still think he's the third choice.
So why start this game? I mean, is this
you need that he needs live. He needs, to be tested in a live match, or
out of your third choice 9 to be tested in a live. I mean,
he's not going with AJ or Sean, but Sean's on the bench.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. That to me, that if that's true, if he's the third choice, and I don't understand the logic of him starting with Sean on the bench. I mean,
I look at that. He's still, because if he didn't play in this game, he'll basically be cold the entire way, because he would not have played a match since the MLR final. So
is a cold third string 9 a big concern? I mean, that of all the things to be worried about, I'd be much more worried about not having my starters get a warm up in September.
Well, I think he's going to play, because he also plays wing. I think he'll see the field on wing. I don't necessarily think he'll see the field at 9. And
all right, we'll see. I think he has a chance, if he plays well this week, to be the starter at 9. So we'll see.
I mean, that could be the case. Where just historically, I think we've gone with, our discussions when we text back and forth is like, I've been trying to take my head out of my head and put it in Gary Gold's head and see who are the guys I've picked. These are the guys I've picked, and the way it's gone has been Davies, DeHaas, Augsburger. No, Davies, DeHaas, Boyer, Augsburger, and Nate beat Boyer out for the starting position at 9 in San Diego this year, played at a high level, and Boyer wasn't even on the 50-man roster. So, so there you go. My only question about this roster is really the halfback pairing. I want to. It makes me think it's about evaluation, and I think they're going to win. Honestly, it's a strong. And then the going to the bench. What questions did you have?
I mean, the obvious question I think is the inclusion of Khalifi, who I love Oliver Khalifi as an MLR player. I think he's done a great job in Seattle. But the way the PNC went, you almost thought Chance Wengluski was going to be the starting loose head. Now he's not even on this roster. Either is David Ainu. And it's not like, again, if you're looking to get a look at someone to make a decision on the fringe, and it's Canada, so you probably could afford to start Oliver Khalifi if that was the purpose of this. So I'm confused by that choice. If assuming that Ainu and Chance Wengluski are both fit right now, which I assume they are.
Yeah, this is the weird one for me. I don't. I mean, he did have a good season before he injured his foot, and then he was in a boot for half the season. And when he tried to play, he Justice Sears Duru had the lock on Seattle's loose head position. So I do have some questions because I don't if he's fit, okay, we're gonna go okay. But then historically, even then, I haven't been a fan of Khalifi. Khalifi is a great guy, love him to death, and I know that's like a backhanded compliment, but there are better players than him.
He's a hard runner. I love, I've probably mentioned this 100 times, but I'm a prop in my rugby world. I love props who can make meters carrying the ball, and at least in MLR, Khalifi does that. He's a hard runner. Obviously, he was part of that 2018 Seattle scrum machine that nobody could cope with. But again, if that's the viewpoint of him, is it just because he wasn't fit during the PNC? Because why was he getting such little love during the PNC? And why was Chance Wengluski getting so much? Those were three crucial warm-up tests before the World Cup where Khalifi got very little action and other loose heads were seemingly ahead of him. So it's really, I look at, he's 32, which, I mean, we look at props, U.S. props a little bit differently. I mean, Fry is older than Khalifi, I'm pretty sure. Let me make sure I'm correct here. But for the most part, I mean, our props are young. Unlike some of you guys come into their prime at 27, 28. So Fry's a year younger than Khalifi, but neither Fry nor Khalifi are likely to be, in our program for the next World Cup. Fry, I know why he's there. Why Ainu and Wengleski are not on the bench behind him and Khalifi is, I don't know. Are we saying Ainu and Wengleski are injured or need some rest, and Fry needs to get a run? Because Fry does need to get a run. Because we haven't seen him. I mean, if he wasn't on this roster, I would assume he wasn't going to Japan.
But is Khalifi going to be better than Ainu or Wengleski, who are likely going to be the loose head props together as a pairing for the next 10 years?
Yeah. And I suspect they're all going to go to Japan, right? I mean, this is just 23. There'll be, when you get to the full 30-plus man World Cup traveling team, I suspect Khalifi and Ainu and Wengluski will probably all be on it. But I don't know where they're going to play.
Khalifi can play the other side. And to an extent, so can Fry. Because who have we seen on the other side? It's been, I think we saw Paddy Ryan, but I don't think Patty Ryan is going to Japan.
No, I don't think so either.
And Dino Waldron wasn't in camp. He was on the wider roster, so he's not going. So that gives you two tight heads in TD and Paul Mullen.
Yeah.
So then you probably need a third, because I think what we'll see is we might go 3 deep across the front row.
Yeah, I think so. I think we very well might. So I don't think Fry is going to be considered an option at tight end, even for depth.
No, I think he's your first choice loose head. I think Khalifi. I think Khalifi's the third tight head. Really,
I think if they use Khalifi, they can maybe get away with one fewer total props, because he could, in a pinch, play either side. I don't think there's anyone other than TT who I suspect will be locked in at tight end. I don't think there's anyone else who's really an option for both sides.
TD
Waldron would be, but I don't think he's going.
TD for a long time, because Fry wasn't available and wasn't healthy, I was like, yeah, I know TD's playing tight end. I don't care. He's still our best loose head. Well, now he's definitely our best tight end. We have options, because Ayunu and Wengleski were not capped when I was saying that.
Yeah.
And both of them have now played multiple caps, played well. So, I guess to wrap this up,
going to be a dynasty of USA props for the next decade.
Yeah. So what's the score?
I say USA 45, Canada 20.
No, I like that score line. I like the gap.
45, Canada 10.
Oh, whoa, man, 35 points. I'm picking Canada to cover that. I think the spread reasonably is probably 35. And if I was a betting man, I'd pick Canada to cover. So, but yeah, I think that's third. I think US scoring over 40 is likely. How much Canada scores, I don't know.
Yeah.
So that about wraps it up.
One more question for you before we sign this off. Anyone on this team you don't think is going to Japan for the USA?
For the USA, for me, of this roster, I don't. On this roster, it would be, the only one I'd probably leave behind is Khalifi.
I think Khalifi's. I think they'll all go, but I think at risk is Khalifi. I think Nate Brakely is as at risk. I think Malinau Pibori is at risk of not going. I mean, they're going to go, I guess, but maybe we should refocus to be in the match day 23 in Japan.
Yeah, so I think Malon and Khalifi are guys that maybe could get left behind. I think Khalifi more so than Malon, but how many games they will play if they get on that 31, maybe they'll play, in the sacrificial match if we do that stuff again. I don't want to have a sacrificial match roster like we did in 2015. I don't want to get murdered by 60 points.
No.
So,
all right, there you have it, folks.
Right. And we will be back for the rest of the fall. I think we're going to be recording normally on Sundays this time. And then in the spring, we will revert to Mondays. But I think for the moment, Sundays might just be a little bit more convenient since we don't have a lot of games to cover. So, and I hope you guys enjoyed Earful of Fantasy. I need to listen to that.
Bring back Melvin Gordon.